A mysterious visitor. John Carter sat alone in his small cabin, the fire crackling in the stone fireplace. Outside, the wind howled through the dark trees, carrying the cold of the approaching storm. Rain tapped against the window, slow at first, then faster, turning into a steady downpour. It was a quiet night, until he heard it. A faint noise, barely noticeable over the storm, a sound that didn't belong. John stiffened, his instincts from years in the military kicking in. He set down his cup of coffee and reached for his old rifle, leaning against the wall. The sound came again, this time louder. A weak, shuffling movement outside. Someone was out there. He moved to the door, his steps silent. He flipped off the cabin's main light, leaving only the glow of the fire. His heart beat steady, controlled. He had lived on this remote colony world for 5 years, far from the crowded cities. No one ever came here. And yet, someone had. John took a deep breath, then pulled the door open. The storm's wind hit him instantly, cold and wild, whipping against his face. He squinted into the darkness, scanning the thick trees surrounding his home. At first, he saw nothing. Just rain, mud, and shadows. Then, his eyes locked onto something near the edge of the forest. A small figure lay crumpled in the dirt, half covered in leaves, and soaked from the rain. It wasn't moving. John's grip tightened on his rifle. He stepped forward carefully, scanning the area for anything else. Was this a trap? The thief? An injured traveler? When he got closer, he froze. It wasn't human. The figure was humanoid, yes, but not from Earth. Its skin was a soft blue, glowing faintly under the rain. Strange, delicate patterns shimmered along its arms, pulsing dimly like veins filled with light. Its face was mostly human-like, but had sharp, feline eyes, half-closed in exhaustion. A thin tail curled slightly in the mud. John had seen many aliens before, during his time as a soldier, but never one like this. The girl, because she did look young, maybe in her teens, was breathing shallowly. Her clothes were torn, her body bruised. She was hurt. John hesitated. Helping her could bring trouble. Maybe she was running from something. Maybe someone was looking for her right now. The smart choice would be to walk away, lock his door, and pretend he saw nothing. But then she made a sound, a soft, painful whimper, barely audible. John sighed. Damn it. He knelt down and carefully slid his arms under her small body. She was light, unnaturally so, as if her bones were hollow. Her skin was cold to the touch. When he lifted her, her head fell weakly against his chest, and she let out a faint breath. John carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind him. The fire's warmth filled the cabin as John laid the girl on his old couch. He moved quickly, grabbing a dry towel and wrapping it around her. She shivered slightly but didn't wake. He studied her up close now. Her face was peaceful, despite the bruises along her jaw, and the deep cut on her shoulder. Her breathing was slow but steady. John cleaned her wounds with careful hands, applying an old med kit he kept from his soldier days. The bleeding stopped quickly, too quickly. Her body healed faster than human flesh, sealing up the wound as soon as he bandaged it. Interesting. He sat back in his chair, watching her, his mind full of questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? And more importantly, why was she here, in the middle of nowhere on a human colony? John didn't like mysteries. Mysteries got people killed. Then she stirred. Her breathing changed first, growing quicker, more aware. Her fingers twitched against the blanket. Her eyelids fluttered, and then her strange golden eyes snapped open. She gasped, sitting up fast, her body tense like a cornered animal. Her gaze darted around the cabin, locking onto John. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a soft, trembling voice, she whispered something. It was one word, but it sent a chill down John's spine. They're coming. Hunted. The fire crackled in the dimly lit cabin, casting flickering shadows on the wooden walls. John Carter remained still, his sharp eyes locked onto the strange alien girl sitting on his couch. She was awake now, her golden feline-like eyes wide with fear. Her small frame trembled beneath the blanket he had wrapped around her. She had spoken only 2 words, but they lingered in the air like a warning. "They're coming." John's grip tightened around his old rifle. He didn't ask who they were. He had learned long ago that when someone said those words, it was never good news. The girl was breathing heavily, her eyes darting to the cabin door as if expecting something, or someone, to burst through at any second. John studied her carefully. She was young, maybe no older than 17 in human years, but there was something in her eyes, something that spoke of terror beyond her age. She tried to move, but her body was still weak. A soft whimper escaped her lips as she clutched her side, where bruises and old wounds were still healing. "You're safe for now," John said, his voice low and calm. "Tell me, who's after you?" The girl's gaze snapped to him, hesitating. Her breathing slowed slightly as she tried to form words. "They," she swallowed hard. "Zorathians." John's expression darkened. That was a name he knew well. The Zorathians were a ruthless alien race, feared across multiple star systems. They were brutal conquerors, known for wiping out entire civilizations when they saw fit. They took what they wanted, left nothing behind. But what the hell were they doing on this backwater colony? John looked at the girl again, realization hitting him. "You," he muttered. "They're here for you." The girl nodded slowly. "They." She winced in pain, struggling to sit up straighter. "They took my people. All of them. I ran. I hid on your world." John exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. So she wasn't just running from some local gang. She was running from them. And now, because she had landed on his doorstep, he was tangled up in something much bigger than he had wanted. But it was too late to back out now. A sharp beep echoed from his old security terminal near the window. John's head snapped toward it. The motion sensors had been triggered. Something, or someone, was out there. His instincts screamed at him. Years of training kicked in, and he moved swiftly, grabbing a scanner from the table. The screen flickered to life, showing faint red blips moving in the darkness just beyond the tree line. 5 of them. John cursed under his breath. The Zorathians had found them faster than he expected. He turned back to the girl. "Can you walk?" She tried, wincing as she swung her legs over the couch. I think so. We need to move. Now." John didn't waste time. He crossed the room, grabbing a worn-out backpack and stuffing it with supplies. Ammunition, a small medkit, and an emergency beacon. He tossed a coat toward the girl. "Put this on. Keep your head down." She obeyed, wrapping the oversized coat around herself. John grabbed his rifle and checked the window again. The figures were closer now, moving with silent, inhuman precision. Then, a new sound cut through the storm. A deep, low hum. John's stomach dropped. A Zorathian hunter drone. The girl's breath hitched. They sent a tracker. John muttered a curse. A tracker drone meant the Zorathians were serious. It would scan for heat signatures, searching for anything living inside the cabin. And once it locked onto them, it would send a signal straight to the main force. They had minutes, if that. John took the girl's wrist, out the back. Now, they moved fast, slipping through the cabin's rear exit and into the stormy night. Rain poured in heavy sheets, soaking them instantly. The thick trees provided cover, but they also made movement slower. John led her toward the narrow path behind his home, an old escape route he had built years ago in case of emergencies. The muddy ground made their steps difficult, and the girl stumbled more than once. Behind them, the deep hum of the drone grew louder. It was close now, sweeping the area with red scanning beams. John's pulse pounded in his ears. If that thing spotted them, they were dead. Then, a sharp mechanical voice cut through the rain. "Tar GT OCATE." John didn't think. He shoved the girl behind a fallen tree, raising his rifle and firing a single shot. The bullet tore through the drone's scanning lens, causing it to sputter and spin wildly before crashing into the mud. Sparks flew as its system overloaded. But it was too late. A distant roar erupted from the forest, the unmistakable battle cry of the Zorethian hunters. They had been found. John turned to the girl. "Run." She didn't argue. She pushed herself forward, following him as they sprinted through the trees. The rain blurred their vision, the sound of pursuit growing closer behind them. John knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The attack. The night was alive with danger. The rain came down in torrents, hammering the earth, turning the ground into a thick, sucking mud. The trees swayed violently in the storm, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. The wind howled through the forest like a wounded beast, but it wasn't loud enough to cover the sound of what was coming. John Carter ran, pulling the strange alien girl behind him. His boots sank into the mud with every step, his muscles burning from the effort. But he didn't slow down. He could hear them, Zorethian hunters, moving through the darkness like predators on the hunt. The girl, Syrah, was struggling to keep up. She was fast, but she was still weak. Her breath came in short, pained gasps, her glowing golden eyes darting wildly in fear. John risked a glance back. Dark figures moved between the trees, their shapes barely visible in the storm. Tall, armored, and silent, the Zorethians didn't run like humans. They glided, their powerful legs carrying them over the rough terrain with unnatural ease. They were closing in. A snap hiss filled the air, a plasma bolt. John yanked Syrah down just as a bright blue streak of energy blasted past them, striking a nearby tree. The bark exploded in a shower of burning splinters. "They're flanking us," John muttered. Syrah gritted her teeth. "We won't outrun them." She was right. These weren't mindless foot soldiers. They were hunters, skilled, fast, efficient. John's brain worked fast. They needed higher ground, somewhere defensible. He scanned the terrain through the downpour. Then he saw it, an old, half-collapsed mining outpost, barely visible against the dark ridge up ahead. It wasn't much, but it was something. "This way." John pulled Syrah toward it, pushing through the storm. His boots slipped, but he kept moving. The hunters were closing in. He could feel it. The mining outpost was an abandoned structure, built into the side of a rocky cliff. Rusted metal scaffolding framed its edges, and a single reinforced door sat in the center. It was exactly what they needed. John threw his shoulder into the door. It creaked but didn't budge. Another plasma bolt screamed past his head, hitting the doorframe. The heat made his skin prickle. "Move." Syrah grabbed his hand, and to his surprise, her veins pulsed with light. There was a sudden thump, a force rippling through the air, and the door slammed open, as if an invisible hand had wrenched it free. John stared at her. Neat trick. She swayed slightly. "Won't last long." John pulled her inside, slamming the door shut behind them. He pressed his back against the metal, his breathing heavy. Outside, the storm raged, but the world had gone eerily silent. Syrah hugged her arms, shivering. "They're not gone." No, they weren't. John took a moment to check their surroundings. The inside of the outpost was a wreck. Dust-covered crates, old mining equipment, and rusted metal beams. But it was defendable. He knelt, grabbing a handful of broken wires from the floor. "Help me." Syrah watched as he began rigging the door, tying together exposed wiring, twisting metal scraps, and setting up a shock trap. "You think that will stop them?" she asked. John gave a tight grin. "No, but it'll slow them down." A sudden thud outside the door made them both freeze. John raised his rifle, motioning for Syrah to get behind cover. Then another sound, scraping. A slow, deliberate noise, like claws dragging across metal. "They're testing us," John whispered. Then the voice came. Deep, hollow, unnatural, human. John's breath stilled. He knew that voice. It belonged to a Zorathian commander. The door shuddered, vibrating under an unseen force. John pressed his back against the nearest crate, gripping his rifle tighter. The voice came again, its words sharp like blades. "You have something that belongs to us." John felt Syrah's fear without even looking at her. She was clutching the fabric of her coat, her glowing veins pulsing rapidly. The Zorathian commander knew she was in here. John's mind raced. He had two options. Try to negotiate. Make them regret ever coming here. He chose the second. With one swift motion, he triggered the shock trap. The door exploded in a burst of crackling electricity, sending blue arcs of energy surging outward. A guttural, alien snarl filled the air as one of the Zorathian hunters was hit full force, its body spasming violently before dropping to the floor, smoke rising from its armor. John didn't wait. He raised his rifle and fired. The first shot struck another Zorathian in the leg. The creature let out a pained hiss but didn't fall. They were tough. The remaining hunters surged forward. The commander, still unseen, stayed at the back, watching. John pulled Syrah behind him. "If you've got any more tricks, now would be a great time." Syrah's breathing quickened. Her veins flared brighter, but she looked hesitant. I can't control it," she said. John's jaw clenched. "Then try." A Zorathian lunged at them. Syrah screamed. Not just a normal scream. A deep, resonating shockwave burst from her mouth, shattering the air. The sound hit the hunters like a hammer, sending them flying into the walls. Their armor cracked. Their weapons sparked. One of them crumpled into a heap, unmoving. Then silence. John stared at her, breathless. Syrah collapsed onto her knees, gasping for air. I didn't mean to." John knelt beside her. "You saved our asses." Outside, the storm had finally begun to fade. But John knew this wasn't over. The Zorathian commander was still out there. And now, he was angry. Escape and revelations. Smoke lingered in the air, mingling with the fading scent of ozone. The collapsed Zorathian hunters lay scattered around the mining outpost, their bodies twitching from Syrah's devastating sonic attack. The walls bore deep cracks from the force of her scream, and the metal scaffolding creaked ominously, threatening to collapse. John Carter didn't waste time marveling at the destruction. He knew they had only won this battle, not the war. Syrah knelt beside him, breathing heavily. Her golden eyes, usually sharp and alert, were glazed with exhaustion. Her glowing veins pulsed erratically, flickering between bright and dim as if her body was struggling to keep up. John placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded weakly. I think so." "Good, because we're not sticking around." He turned his attention to the Zorathian bodies. 3 were definitely dead. 1 was unconscious. But the commander, the one who had spoken, was nowhere to be seen. He had escaped. John's gut tightened. That meant reinforcements were coming. And soon. He grabbed Syrah's wrist. "We need to go. Now." She struggled to stand, her legs wobbling beneath her. "I don't." "Where?" John's mind was already working on an escape plan. His cabin was compromised. The mining outpost was no longer an option. They needed to disappear, completely. "I have an old hoverbike stashed not far from here," he said. "We ride into the canyons. The terrain will slow them down." Syrah hesitated. "You don't understand. They won't stop." John gave a dry chuckle. "Lady, I fought in 2 wars. I know exactly what that means." She met his gaze then, something deep and unreadable in her eyes. For a second, he had the strange feeling she was about to say something important. But before she cooled, a loud screech ripped through the sky. John's blood ran cold. He turned his head sharply toward the storm-lit horizon. In the distance, hovering against the darkened sky, was a Zorathian dropship, Its sleek black surface reflected the lightning, its underbelly lined with glowing red lights. Reinforcements. John cursed. Move. Sarah stumbled forward, forcing herself into a run as John led the way through the back of the outpost. They slipped through a crumbling side entrance, entering the jagged mountain paths behind the old mine. The rain had lessened, but the ground was still slick with mud. Their boots skidded over the rocks as they moved, every step a struggle. John kept an ear trained on the ship behind them. The low, mechanical hum of its engines told him one thing: it wasn't landing. It was tracking. Sarah's breath came in gasps. How? How do they always find me? John didn't slow down. You tell me. She shook her head. I don't know. I thought I got away. John gritted his teeth. Something didn't add up. If she had managed to escape the Zorethians before, how were they always on her trail? They had tracking drones, sure, but that didn't explain why they had shown up so fast. Unless... His stomach dropped. Sarah. She looked up at him. What did they do to you before you escaped? Her brow furrowed. They kept me locked up for weeks. They ran tests. John felt a sinking feeling settle in his chest. Did they ever inject you with anything? Her glowing veins flickered. Yes, many times. John cursed under his breath. They tagged you. Her eyes widened. What? They put something inside you. A tracker. That's how they're always one step behind. Sarah's face went pale. I didn't know. John grabbed her shoulders. Listen to me. We have to get it out. A sharp whine filled the air. John turned just in time to see a hunter drone streak through the sky above them, its red scanning beam sweeping over the ground. It spotted them. The drone let out a high-pitched alarm, signaling to the dropship above. John grabbed Sarah's hand. No time. Run. They sprinted toward the narrow ridge ahead, where John's hoverbike was hidden beneath a rocky overhang. The Zorethian ship roared overhead, its thrusters sending shockwaves through the ground. John skidded to a stop near the bike, a battered but functional military-grade speeder. Get on. Sarah barely managed to climb onto the back before John slammed the ignition. The hover bike roared to life, engines whining as it lifted off the ground. They shot forward, just as the first Zorethian gunfire rained down behind them. Plasma bolts tore into the rocky terrain, sending up explosions of dirt and debris. John twisted the throttle hard, weaving through the winding canyon paths. Sarah held onto him tightly, her fingers digging into his jacket. They're still following. John gritted his teeth, checking the rear scanner. The dropship was still overhead, its cannons tracking them. The drone was moving ahead, trying to cut them off. They had seconds before it fired. John's mind raced. The canyon walls were tall, jagged, too narrow for the ship to follow directly. But the drone was faster, more maneuverable. His only chance was outflying it. He jerked the bike left, taking a sharp turn into an even tighter pass. The drone followed, speeding up. John slammed a button on his dashboard. Behind them, a hidden charge exploded, a trick he had set up years ago for hunting wild predators. The shockwave hit the drone head-on, sending it spiraling into the canyon wall. It smashed into the rocks, breaking apart in a shower of fire. Sarah gasped. That was amazing. John let out a short breath. We're not out yet. He gunned the throttle again, pushing the hoverbike to its limits. The dropship wasn't firing anymore. It was rerouting. They're pulling back, Sarah said. John narrowed his eyes. No. They're regrouping. And that meant they weren't done. Sarah swallowed. What do we do now? John's jaw tightened. First, we get that tracker out of you. He turned the bike toward the horizon. There was only one man he knew who could help them now, and he wasn't going to like it. The last stand at Black Ridge. The night air was thick with tension. The whine of the hoverbike's engine had long since faded into the background, replaced by the rhythmic thumping of John Carter's pulse. His grip on the handlebars was tight, his mind calculating every possible scenario. He had seen war, fought battles that left scars deeper than the ones on his skin. But this felt different. Syra clung to him from behind, her fingers gripping his jacket tightly. She was still shaking, whether from exhaustion or fear, he couldn't tell. The wind whipped past them, carrying the distant hum of the Zorathian dropship still searching the skies. They had barely escaped. Barely. Now John was banking on an old battlefield from his past. Black Ridge. It had been a human outpost during the colonial wars, a place of bloodshed and last stands. Most of it had been abandoned for years, forgotten by all but ghosts and scavengers. But John remembered. And more importantly, he knew how to defend it. The bike skidded to a stop at the edge of the ridge, kicking up dirt and dust. Towering rock formations jutted into the sky like broken teeth, their jagged surfaces creating a natural fortress. Below, an old military station lay in ruins, its structures covered in vines and thyme. John killed the engine and swung off the bike, scanning the area. It was silent, the kind of silence that set a soldier on edge. Syra slid off behind him, stumbling slightly. John caught her elbow. "Still with me?" She nodded, but she was pale. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." "You won't have to," he said. "We just need time to cut that tracker out of you." She touched her arm where her glowing veins pulsed beneath her skin. I don't even know where it is." John pulled a small scanner from his bag and waved it over her body. A faint beeping filled the air. His jaw tightened. The signal wasn't coming from her arm. It was coming from her spine. Syra saw his expression and swallowed hard. "That's bad, isn't it?" John exhaled. "Yeah, it means surgery." She blinked. "Surgery? Unless you've got magic powers to reach inside and pull it out yourself." Syra bit her lip, but there was no time to argue. John turned toward the abandoned station. "Come on, we don't have much time." Preparing for war. The inside of the outpost was exactly as John remembered, dusty, rusted, and filled with old weapons left to rot. He moved quickly, searching through the crates, his hands instinctively grabbing supplies. EMP mines, kinetic barriers, plasma rifles. He knew the Zorathians would come. They always did. Syra watched from the corner, rubbing her arms. "You've done this before," she said softly. John glanced at her. "What? Fought against impossible odds?" She nodded. A humorless smile tugged at his lips. "Yeah, more times than I can count." Her eyes flickered with something, admiration. Fear. He couldn't tell. John tossed her a small energy pistol. "Ever used one of these?" She caught it, weighing it in her hands. "No." "Then learn fast." He stepped to the doorway, staring out at the black horizon. The Zorathians were coming. He could feel it in his bones. And when they arrived, he'd be ready. The first strike. The attack came just before dawn. It started with a low vibration in the air, a distant hum that sent shivers up John's spine. Then the storm clouds split, and the Zorathian ship loomed overhead. A red light scanned the outpost, locking onto their location. Then the sky exploded. Plasma fire rained down, turning the ground into molten glass. The first blast obliterated the outpost's outer wall, sending debris flying. John dove behind cover, dragging Syra with him. "They're not playing around," she yelled over the deafening roar. "They never do." The ship descended, deploying its strike team. 6 Zorathian hunters dropped to the ground, their bio-armor glistening under the dim light. John set his rifle against his shoulder. "Showtime." He squeezed the trigger. The first Zorathian didn't even have time to react. John's shot slammed into its visor, shattering the reinforced glass. The alien staggered, its body going limp before crashing to the ground. 5 left. But they weren't going to make it easy. The others moved fast, firing plasma rounds that tore through the air. John ducked, rolling behind a crate as the shots melted through the metal beside him. Sarah crouched low, gripping the pistol in her trembling hands. I can't do this. John grabbed her arm, forcing her to meet his gaze. You can. You don't have a choice. A Zorathian leaped over the barricade, its blade arm extending, ready to strike. Sarah screamed, but this time, she controlled it. The shockwave blasted outward, throwing the Zorathian backward into a wall. Its armor cracked, a deep dent forming in its chest. John finished the job with a bullet to the head. 4 left. Sarah gasped, staring at her hands. I did it. John grinned. Yeah, and you're gonna do it again. Another explosion rocked the outpost as the ship deployed reinforcements. John's heart pounded. He needed to end this. Fast. The defying gamble. John made a decision. A crazy one. He activated the last EMP mine and set the timer. Get ready to run, he told Sarah. Her eyes widened. Run where? He smirked. Away from the explosion. Then he grabbed his rifle and charged. The Zorathians turned just in time to see him sprinting toward them, gun blazing. John dove behind their cover, firing point blank. A third Zorathian fell. 3 left. The EMP mine started beeping faster. John grabbed Sarah's hand. Now. They sprinted for the canyon's edge just as the EMP detonated. A pulse of blue energy shot outward, disabling the ship's scanners, shutting down the enemy weapons. The last thing John saw was the Zorathians scrambling, their armor shorting out. Then, boom! The entire outpost erupted, flames roaring into the sky. John and Sarah hit the ground, rolling down the rocky slope. Silence followed. Only the crackling of fire remained. John groaned, lifting his head. The Zorathian ship was retreating, its systems damaged. They had won. For now. Sarah turned to him, her face pale. Is it over? John exhaled. Not even close. They needed to keep moving. Because the real fight was just beginning. The Overlord's offer. The fire still smoldered in the ruins of Black Ridge. Smoke curled into the dark sky, mixing with the distant glow of dawn on the horizon. John Carter sat on a jagged rock, his rifle balanced on his knee, scanning the charred battlefield. The bodies of the Zorathian hunters lay scattered across the broken landscape, their armor cracked and lifeless. They had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. Sarah sat beside him, silent. The faint glow of her veins had dimmed, exhaustion weighing heavy on her small frame. Her golden eyes flickered between relief and dread. She knew, just as John did, that this fight wasn't over. John rubbed his temple. His ribs ached from the blast, his muscles sore from the relentless battle. He had seen enough war to recognize a temporary win when he saw one. The real enemy hadn't even arrived yet. Not him. Not the Overlord. The sky above them was too quiet, too empty. The Zorathians never retreated unless they had a reason, and John had a sick feeling that the reason was already on its way. Sarah finally spoke. They'll come back, won't they? John sighed. Yeah, and this time, they won't send just hunters. She swallowed. Then what do we do? John looked down at her. She was tough, he had to admit. She had survived hell, but she was still a kid. She didn't deserve to be hunted like this. We keep moving, he said. We find a way to get that tracker out of you, and we disappear. Sarah hesitated. And if they find us again? John exhaled slowly. Then we do what we do best. A small, tired smile played at her lips. We fight. John smirked. Damn right. But just as he was about to stand, the world changed. A low, deep hum vibrated through the air, so powerful it sent shivers through John's bones. The ground beneath them trembled as the sky darkened unnaturally, the stars above vanishing behind something massive. John's gut twisted. It was here. A Zorathian dreadnought. It wasn't just a ship. It was a war machine, the size of a city, gliding through the sky like a silent executioner. It blocked out the sun, casting a shadow so deep that for a moment, it felt like the night had returned. Sarah gasped. No, 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 no. John grabbed her wrist. Move. Now. But it was too late. The air split apart with an ear-piercing shriek. A column of red energy slammed into the earth just meters in front of them. The impact threw John backward, his vision flickering as the world spun. When he opened his eyes, he wasn't alone anymore. A figure stood in the smoke. Tall, powerful, wrapped in black bio-armor, its jagged plates pulsing with an eerie crimson glow. Its long, clawed hands flexed slowly, as if savoring the moment. A flowing, midnight-colored cloak billowed behind it, unaffected by the wind. The Overlord. John had seen Zorathian leaders before, but this one was different. This one felt ancient. The Overlord didn't move at first. He simply stared at them, his piercing, inhuman silver eyes boring into John's soul. Then, in a voice that sent ice through John's veins, he spoke. Human. John didn't reach for his rifle. He knew better. This wasn't a fight he could win with bullets. The Overlord's gaze flicked towards Sirah, his expression unreadable. Then he tilted his head slightly, almost amused. You've done well to keep her alive, he said, his voice a deep, resonant hum. I expected her to die in the wilderness. But you're something else, aren't you? John stayed silent, muscles tense. He wasn't about to play whatever mind game this bastard was trying. The Overlord took a step forward. I did not come here to kill you, Carter. John's eyes narrowed. No. The Overlord smiled. It was the kind of smile that came from something that had never feared anything in its entire life. No, I came to make you an offer. John didn't reply, but Sirah's breathing hitched beside him. The Overlord's silver eyes flickered to her, his voice turning almost gentle. You are protecting something you do not understand, he said. She is not what you think she is. She is not an innocent fugitive. She is a weapon. John didn't blink. A weapon. The Overlord nodded slowly. She carries something ancient inside her. A power even she cannot control. If she unlocks it fully, it will destroy not just us, but your people as well. Sirah shook her head. He's lying. The Overlord chuckled. Am I? John clenched his jaw. He had seen Sirah's power firsthand. The way her voice alone had torn through armor. And that had only been a fraction of what she was capable of. The Overlord took another step forward, his presence like a black hole in the world. I do not wish to kill her. I wish to contain her. Sirah flinched. You mean enslave me? The Overlord's smile didn't falter. Call it what you wish, but if you truly care for her, you will give her to me. Willingly. John's fingers twitched toward his gun. The Overlord noticed and laughed. I could kill you in a breath, human, he said. Do not mistake my offer for weakness. John met his gaze, unflinching. And do not mistake my refusal for fear. The Overlord tilted his head again, studying him like a scientist studies an insect. Fascinating. The ground rumbled. The air grew heavier. The dreadnought above them shifted, its massive weapons humming to life. The Overlord sighed. Very well. His silver eyes burned. Then you will die with her. Before John could react, the Overlord raised his hand, and the sky exploded. A blast of pure force sent John and Sirah flying backward, the world turning red as the Overlord's power crashed down upon them. The last thing John saw before everything went dark was Sirah screaming, unleashing the storm. Pain. It was the first thing John Carter felt when consciousness clawed its way back to him. A deep, throbbing ache pulsed through his body, like every bone had been cracked and barely stitched back together. His ears rang, drowning out everything except the dull, muffled hum of the world around him. Slowly, he forced his eyes open. The sky above him was red, not from the sunrise, but from the burning atmosphere. The Zorathian dreadnought loomed overhead like a second moon, its cannon still glowing from the devastation it had unleashed. John blinked through the pain, pushing himself up onto his elbows. His fingers dug into the dirt, finding it scorched and glassed from the sheer heat of the Overlord's attack. His pulse was sluggish, his breaths coming in sharp, ragged gasps. Then he remembered. Syrah. His head snapped to the side. She was lying a few feet away, her small form half buried in the rubble. Her breathing was shallow, her golden eyes barely open. Her veins pulsed erratically, the glow flickering like a dying light bulb. John crawled toward her, ignoring the fire in his muscles. "Syrah," he rasped. "Come on, kid. Wake up." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. John's jaw clenched. He could still feel the overwhelming power that had knocked them out. The Overlord's raw energy, something far beyond human understanding. If it weren't for Syrah's presence, for whatever unnatural force she carried inside her, John was sure he'd be dead already. But they weren't safe. Not even close. A shadow fell over them. John turned his head slowly. The Overlord stood just beyond the wreckage, untouched by the destruction he had caused. His black bio-armor shimmered in the firelight, his silver eyes glowing like cold stars. He didn't look angry. He didn't look impatient. He looked disappointed. "You refuse to understand," the Overlord said, his deep voice vibrating through the air. "You are protecting something that will bring ruin to your kind. To all kinds." John pulled his pistol from his belt, his grip tight even though he knew it was useless. "She's not a weapon." The Overlord exhaled, shaking his head. "You think I fear her for what she is now? No." He took a slow step forward. "I fear her for what she will become." John felt Syrah shift beside him. A weak, trembling whisper escaped her lips. "John." Her hand clutched his sleeve. He turned to her, his heart tightening. She looked at him with terror, not at the Overlord. At herself. I can't stop it," she gasped, her body trembling. It's waking up." John didn't understand at first. Then he saw it. The glow beneath her skin was spreading. Not just in her veins now. It was bursting outward, crackling through the air like miniature lightning. Her fingers twitched, and a pulse of energy rippled outward, warping the space around her. John felt it in his bones. Syrah was losing control. The Overlord watched her with an eerie stillness. "You see now, don't you?" he said. "This is not power she commands. It is power that will consume her." John gritted his teeth. "Then I'll stop it." The Overlord's cold laughter echoed through the battlefield. "How?" "With your human arrogance. Your stubborn refusal to accept the truth." He spread his arms. "Let me end this before she burns everything." John's mind raced. He knew, deep down, that the Overlord wasn't bluffing. Syrah was changing. The ground beneath them shook, cracked spider webbing through the scorched earth. The air distorted, as if reality itself was struggling to hold together around her. She clutched her head, her breath coming in ragged sobs. "John, it hurts." He grabbed her by the shoulders. "Listen to me. I know you're scared, but you're not alone. You're stronger than this." She shook her head wildly. "No, I can't." The Overlord raised his hand, ready to strike. John moved first. He threw himself over Syrah, shielding her as the Overlord's energy blast ripped through the air. But before it could hit, the world exploded in white. Unleashing this storm, John couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't think. The sheer force of the energy burst swallowed everything, drowning the world in blinding light. And in the center of it all, Syrah screamed. But it wasn't like before. This time, it wasn't just sound. It was power. Her body lifted from the ground, her veins turning into streams of pure, crackling lightning. The sky above them split apart, the clouds swirling into a massive vortex, charged with unstoppable force. John was thrown back as a shockwave blasted outward, tearing across the battlefield. The Overlord staggered, his armor sparking as the energy slammed into him. For the first time, his expression twisted into shock. "Impossible," he hissed. John barely managed to look up. Syrah wasn't the same girl anymore. Her eyes were glowing white, her hair floating, strands crackling with the same energy that coursed through the air. Her entire body pulsed with an unstoppable storm, her fingers clenched into fists. The earth beneath her had lifted into the air, floating in jagged shards as if gravity itself had bent to her will. John had never seen anything like it. Syrah turned her gaze toward the Overlord. And for the first time, the Overlord took a step back. John had no idea if Syrah was still in control. He had no idea if she even knew who she was anymore. But when she raised her hand and the storm answered, he knew one thing for certain. The Overlord was afraid. Lightning tore from the sky, slamming into the battlefield, blasting the ground apart. The dreadnought above them began to break, its metal frame splitting as Syrah's unleashed power ripped through it. John barely had time to react before Syrah's power engulfed everything. The last thing he heard was the Overlord screaming. Then, silence. AFTRMMAT. John opened his eyes. The sky was clear. The dreadnought was gone, nothing but a burning wreck in the distance. And Syrah, she lay unconscious in the dirt, her veins no longer glowing, her breathing shallow. John crawled toward her, ignoring the pain in his body. He pressed his fingers against her neck. A pulse. She was alive. A weak, hoarse voice escaped her lips. "John." He exhaled. "Yeah, kid. I'm here." She barely smiled before her eyes fluttered shut again. John looked out at the battlefield. The Overlord was nowhere to be seen. He didn't know if Syrah had killed him. But he knew one thing. The war wasn't over. It was only just beginning.